The faint drip of bathwater echoed through the hall when I opened the door and found my wife wrapped around our neighbor. Still, I kept my hand steady on the knob, letting that slow drip calm the fury rising in my chest. As the sound deepened, it reminded me how long our daughter had cried while they laughed behind this wall. While I stood there, the drip became the rhythm of every lie my marriage had survived. The same drip sharpened my realization that betrayal doesn't start in a bathtub, it spills long before. That's when I knew. Some doors a husband locks not for revenge, but to save what's left of his family. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day's gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. Daniel pushed open the front door with the heavy stiffness of a man who had worked a 12-hour shift on bad coffee and worse weather. The cold clung to his jacket as he stepped inside, waiting for the familiar warmth of home to meet him. But instead, the house felt hollow, too still, too quiet. And then he heard it. A soft, broken cry floated from somewhere upstairs. At first he thought he imagined it. He held his breath, listened again. The sound came again, shaky, exhausted, a little girl trying not to fall apart. "Daddy, I'm hungry." "Emma." The words cut deeper than any tool he handled at the shop. Daniel closed the door carefully, scanning the living room as he walked in. Toys were scattered across the floor like someone had swept them aside with a hurried foot. A bowl sat on the counter with uncooked pasta still inside, dry and forgotten. The sink had an untouched pan beside it. No dinner, no movement, no sign anyone had tried. He set his keys down slowly, each small clink echoing louder than it should. "Emma," he called softly. Her sobs answered before she did. He climbed the stairs, taking them two at a time, trying not to sound panicked even though his chest tightened with every step. At the top, Emma stood in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes with the back of her small hand. Her hair was messy, her cheeks blotchy from crying, and she looked at him as though she wasn't sure he was real. "Daddy," she whispered, voice trembling, "I'm really hungry." He knelt instantly, pulling her against his chest. Her ribs felt too small, too fragile under his hands. "I'm here, sweetheart," he murmured, stroking her hair. "It's okay, Daddy's here now." But even as he said it, something else intruded on the moment. Running water. Loud, forceful, like a bath being filled too high. And beneath it, barely audible at first, he heard laughter. Two voices, muffled, playful. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. He lifted his head toward the hallway, toward the closed bathroom door where steam seeped out in a thin ribbon. The laughter grew clearer the closer he listened, the sound bouncing casually against the tiles, careless and intimate in the way people are when they think they're safe. His jaw locked. He stood slowly, keeping Emma close for another few seconds. He didn't want to put her down, not when she was trembling from hunger and fear. But he had to. Something told him that whatever waited behind that door would demand both his hands steady and his heart cold. "Go wait in your room for just a minute, okay?" he whispered. Emma nodded, trusting, tired. She padded down the hall while Daniel walked the other direction, toward the bathroom. Water sloshed, a soft splash. Then Megan's unmistakable laugh, lighter than it had sounded in months, followed by a man's voice responding with low amusement. Daniel's knuckles tightened. He forced himself to breathe, to move slowly, quietly, because rushing in might break something in him he wouldn't recover from. He raised his hand and knocked once. Silence. Then hurried, muffled whispers. "Megan," he called through the wood, not angry, not even loud, just controlled. No answer. Another laugh, this one abruptly cut off, followed by the faint scrape of movement. Someone shifting in the tub, someone trying to get quiet far too late. Daniel reached for the doorknob, turning it just enough to crack the door open an inch. Steam rolled out. His eyes adjusted slowly. And then everything inside him went still. Megan's hair was piled on top of her head, her bare shoulders visible above a foam of bubbles. And leaning toward her, relaxed and smirking as though he belonged there, was Ryan Blake, the neighbor. The man who waved from his driveway every morning. The man with the too bright smile and too easy jokes. The man Daniel had invited over for barbecues, beers, trust. They froze the moment they saw the sliver of light, the open door him. Megan's mouth parted, but no sound came out. Ryan instinctively pulled the bubbles higher around himself, as though modesty mattered now. Daniel didn't speak, didn't shout, didn't give them anything to twist later. Instead, he closed the door just as quietly as he had opened it. The soft click sounded loud, other than a gunshot in the hallway. His hand lingered on the knob for a moment. Then he slid the lock from the outside, a small metallic snap sealing them in, and stepped back. Inside the bathroom, he heard Megan gasp, heard Ryan curse under his breath, heard movement and splashing as they realized what he had done. But Daniel felt none of it. Just a sudden, icy clarity settling over him. His daughter had been crying for food. His wife had been laughing in a bathtub with another man. And something inside Daniel, something he didn't know he still had the strength to feel, began to harden into steel. He turned toward Emma's room, the cold plan forming in the back of his mind, waiting. The night wasn't finished with him yet. The kitchen felt colder than the rest of the house, as if the shock from upstairs had seeped into the walls. Daniel set Emma in her booster seat, her small legs swinging tiredly as she watched him with the hopeful eyes of a child who had been disappointed too many times tonight. He moved with stiff, controlled motions, opening the cabinet, grabbing the box of mac and cheese, filling a pot with water. Every clatter of metal sounded harsher than usual. His hands trembled once, then again. He curled them into fists, forcing the tremor to stop. Emma didn't need to see his anger, not yet, not like this. She sniffed softly. "Daddy, is it okay?" He turned to her and managed a smile, gentle but thin. "It's okay, sweetheart. Dinner's coming." When the mac and cheese was finally done, he scooped a generous portion into her bowl. She dug in immediately, the first bite almost desperate. Watching her eat so hungrily twisted something deep and painful inside him. This shouldn't have happened. She should never have cried herself sick while both adults in this house ignored her existence. Daniel sat across from her, elbows on the table, hands still quivering. The shaking was subtle, barely noticeable, but he felt every tremor like a jolt of electricity running through his bones. He pulled out his phone to silence it, not wanting any noise to disturb Emma's small moment of comfort. But the screen lit up before he even pressed anything. A text from Megan. "Can you give me an hour?" He didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move. It was so casual, so dismissive, as if she were asking him to pick up milk on the way home, as if she weren't locked in a bathroom with another man while their daughter sat outside in tears. The audacity in those 5 words made something inside him twist into something darker, sharper. He stared at the message for a long, heavy moment, the glow from the screen painting a pale light across his tightening jaw. His disbelief slid quickly into something colder, a slow, chilling fury that didn't explode, it condensed. When he finally lowered the phone, his eyes landed on Ryan's shoes by the hallway table. Brown leather, polished, expensive. They sat proudly where Ryan had kicked them off earlier, like a man settling into a place he believed belonged to him. Daniel's rage tightened like a clamp around his ribs. He imagined Ryan walking into his home with those same shoes, walking past Emma, walking toward Megan without even pretending to hide it. Did they laugh as they came upstairs? Were they whispering to each other while his daughter cried? Were they that confident he'd never come home early enough to notice? "Daddy?" Emma asked, interrupting the storm brewing behind his eyes. He blinked, refocusing on her small, round face. She lifted her spoon halfway, pausing as she studied him. "Where's Mommy?" The question landed like a punch. Emma wasn't asking to accuse. She wasn't asking to complain. She was asking with that innocent belief that parents were supposed to show up, no matter what. She didn't understand betrayal or selfishness or adult cowardice. She only understood hunger and loneliness and the absence of the person who should have been there. Daniel swallowed hard. "Mommy's busy," he said softly, forcing the words out. They felt bitter on his tongue. Emma accepted the answer without challenge. She returned to her food, but slower now, sensing something was wrong even if she didn't know what. Daniel leaned back in his chair, inhaling a long, steadying breath. Humiliation mixed with fury inside him until the weight of it made his shoulders ache. He had seen a lot of things in life: broken engines, broken promises, broken men. But nothing prepared him for the image of his wife laughing with another man while their child begged for dinner. He felt that humiliation burned deeper than the fury. It wasn't just betrayal. It was disrespect, dismissal, the kind of carelessness that revealed exactly how little Megan thought of him, of their family, of everything he had worked to build. But the shaking in his hands slowly stopped. Not because he wasn't angry anymore. Because his anger had focused now. He looked again at Megan's message. "Give me an hour," as if he were an inconvenience, as if his role was to accommodate her affair, as if she had already rewritten the rules of their household, confident he would stay quiet. Daniel placed his phone screen down on the table, decision crystallizing inside him. This ends tonight. Not in violence, not in chaos, but in precision, in planning, in a clean, undeniable truth that no one, not Megan, not Ryan, not any courtroom, could twist. He reached out and brushed a crumb from Emma's cheek. She smiled, tired but grateful, and that small smile sealed it. Whatever happened next would happen for her. He stood slowly, collecting their dishes, his mind already sharpening into something steady and deliberate. Tonight would be the last night he lived in the dark. And upstairs, behind the locked bathroom door, two people had no idea what was coming. Daniel had been listening to the water behind the bathroom door for the past 20 minutes, the heavy roar gradually softening into dripping and shuffling. Emma sat curled against his chest, half asleep after finally eating, her breathing slow and rhythmic. The house was too quiet otherwise. No footsteps, no apologies, no shame from the people locked inside that bathroom. Only the faint echo of their whispered laughter earlier still hung in the air like a stain he couldn't scrub off. When the latch finally clicked from the inside, Daniel lifted his eyes toward the hallway. The door swung open, and a cloud of damp steam rolled out first. Then Megan appeared, wrapped loosely in one of his robes, hair wet, cheeks flushed in a way that made something inside him melt and then harden all over again. A second later, Ryan stepped out behind her, also wearing a robe, one of Daniel's guest robes from the linen closet, his hair dripping onto the hardwood floor like he owned the place. They were laughing about something, carefree and unguarded, and then they saw him. Everything stopped. Megan froze, mouth half open. Ryan blinked twice, the color draining from his face as though someone had pulled a plug. Daniel didn't move. He didn't even blink in their direction. The silence was heavier than any words he could have spoken. He simply shifted Emma higher on his shoulder, her small hand still clutching his shirt, and stood up. Ryan cleared his throat first, trying to force out a chuckle. "Hey, man, didn't know you were home already." His voice wavered, the joke falling flat before it even reached the air. Daniel walked right past him without a glance. That cut deeper than shouting ever would. Megan stepped forward, panic blooming in her eyes as she realized silence meant control, his control. She rushed ahead, blocking his path halfway down the hallway, her robe tied hastily, shoulders heaving. "Daniel, wait, it's not what it looked like." The sentence was so absurd it nearly knocked the breath from him, not from disbelief, but from the audacity of it, the gaslighting, the immediate attempt to rewrite reality even though the steam was still clinging to her skin. He didn't look at her. Not once. He shifted his body slightly to the side and continued walking with Emma in his arms, the quiet of his footsteps louder than any accusation she expected. "Daniel," Megan snapped, voice rising with embarrassment now that Ryan was watching, robe dripping, face stiff. "You're overreacting. We were just—" But he didn't give her the dignity of finishing the lie. He reached the stairs and descended slowly, deliberately, Emma's sleepy weight grounding him, steadying the storm inside. He could feel Megan's stare burning into his back, desperate and furious, the beginnings of damage control already forming in her mind, because someone had finally seen behind the curtain she thought she kept so carefully closed. When he reached the bottom, Ryan called after him in a weak attempt at bravado. "Dude, come on. Don't make this weird." Daniel didn't even turn his head. The absolute silence in response made Ryan's voice crack into nothing. He crossed the living room without stopping, stepping over the forgotten toys, past the uncooked pasta still on the counter, past every sign of a home neglected in favor of a thrill upstairs. His jaw was locked so tightly he felt the muscle tremble against his skin. Behind him, Megan hurried down the stairs, her footsteps frantic. "Daniel, talk to me. You can't just Daniel." But he could. He opened the front door, the cold night air sweeping in, carrying away the thick humidity of betrayal that had filled the house. Outside, the sky was dark and sharp with early winter wind. Emma stirred in his arms and tightened her grip around his shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered to her, just loud enough that she could hear the stability in his tone, even if he didn't feel it yet. Megan appeared in the doorway behind him, face blotchy, robe clutched tight around her. "Daniel, you're being dramatic. Don't just walk out like this. You're making a scene." He stepped off the porch without acknowledging her, the crunch of gravel under his boots becoming the ano. Why answer she deserved tonight? When he reached the car, he opened the back door carefully and lowered Emma into her booster seat. She blinked up at him with heavy eyes, confusion mixing with the lingering fear of earlier. "Daddy." Daniel leaned in, brushing a strand of hair off her forehead. "Daddy-'s here," he whispered, his voice steady, anchored in a certainty he hadn't felt in years. "Daddy-'s got you." Her eyes softened, trusting. She reached for his hand before releasing it and settling back, safe at last. He closed the car door gently. Behind him, Megan was still calling his name, but her voice was distant now, fading behind the sound of his heartbeat, and the quiet, deliberate decision forming in his bones. The night wasn't finished. Not even close. The neon sign of the 24-hour diner buzzed faintly in the wind, casting a pale pink glow across the parking lot as Daniel carried Emma through the double doors. The warm scent of frying onions and fresh coffee wrapped around them like a blanket, comforting, lived in, safe. It was almost jarring how peaceful the diner felt compared to the storm he had walked away from just minutes earlier. He slid into a booth with Emma beside him. Her small body leaned instinctively toward him, still exhausted, still shaken. When the waitress brought over a children's menu and crayons, Emma didn't touch them. She simply rested her head on Daniel's arm. "You hungry, sweetheart?" he asked softly. She nodded, barely lifting her eyes. "Yeah, still hungry." "Still?" The word hit him harder than it should have. She had been waiting for hours. Daniel ordered mac and cheese again, this time steaming, fresh, real, and a small bowl of fruit. When the plate arrived, Emma ate slowly at first, then faster, as though her body remembered it was starving. Every tiny bite filled Daniel with gratitude and guilt all at once. But then he noticed the bruise. A faint purple blotch on her upper arm, shaped like she had slipped and caught herself badly on something. Not a handprint, not abuse, but an accident that should never have happened without someone there to help her. His chest tightened painfully. "Hey, Em," he murmured, keeping his voice soft so she wouldn't tense. "What happened to your arm?" She paused mid-bite and looked down. I fell in the hallway. Today. She nodded. I called Mommy, but she didn't hear me. She was in her room with her music loud. Neglect not once, not tonight only, something habitual, something she already understood as normal. Daniel's stomach dropped. He pulled out his phone and gently asked, "Can I take a picture, sweetheart? Just so I remember to tell the doctor later." She nodded again, trusting without hesitation. He photographed the bruise, then the way her shirt sat crooked from where she'd wiped tears earlier. He captured timestamps, her plate, her exhaustion, everything that showed the truth without exaggeration. He was so focused he didn't immediately notice the waitress standing a few feet away. She was in her 50s, apron faded from years of double shifts, hands resting on her hips in quiet concern. "Sir," she said softly, approaching the table. "I don't mean to intrude, but I heard a little of what she said." Daniel stiffened slightly, not defensive, just raw, unprepared. "I'm not judging," she added, lowering her voice. "But if you need someone to say what condition she was in when you came in, I can do that. I've seen plenty. A child this hungry, this tired, someone wasn't watching her." Daniel met her gaze, surprised by the genuine kindness there. "You'd be willing to say that, officially?" She nodded without hesitation. "I've done it before. You tell me if you need my name." For a moment Daniel couldn't speak. Gratitude swelled in his throat so tightly it almost hurt. "Thank you," he managed, voice rough. When she walked away, he turned back to Emma, who was now picking at the fruit, calmer, safer. He forced a steady breath. Can I ask you something else?" She looked up, mouth stained orange from mac and cheese. "Does Mommy have people over a lot when I'm not home?" Emma nodded like it wasn't a secret at all. "Yeah, her friends, mostly one friend. They laugh really loud. Sometimes they don't hear me when I call." A quiet shatter echoed inside him. Not rage this time, but heartbreak so deep it felt ancient. Emma wasn't describing a one-time mistake. She was describing a pattern, a routine, a life lived around her, not with her. Daniel leaned forward, smoothing her hair gently. "Thank you for telling me," he whispered. "You're very brave." She smiled faintly, proud without knowing why. As she finished her food, Daniel opened the Notes app on his phone. His fingers felt steadier than they had all night. He began typing. 8:42 p.m. arrived home, found child unattended. 8:47 p.m. child crying from hunger. 8:50 p.m. found wife and neighbor in bathroom together. 9:15 p.m. took child to diner. Noticed bruise on left upper arm. Witness available. Each line carved out another piece of the truth, not dramatized, not embellished, just reality, cold, unavoidable, documented. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about protection, about evidence, about making sure no one, especially Megan, could ever twist tonight into something it was. Daniel looked at Emma one more time. She was finally full, finally warm, finally safe enough to lean her head against the window and drift toward sleep. He closed his phone, his decision fully formed. Tonight was only the beginning. And whatever happened next would be recorded. Daniel had just finished buckling Emma into her booster seat when the fatigue finally hit him, not the kind that came from a double shift at the shop, but the emotional exhaustion that comes from pretending you're steady while your world cracks. Emma was already drifting, head tilted to the side, breath soft against the cold window. He shut the truck door gently and leaned against it for a moment, letting the night air cool the heat in his chest. He was about to get in on the driver's side when someone tapped on his window. Not harshly, not urgently, just a light, deliberate knock. Daniel straightened, muscles coiling instinctively. The parking lot was dim, washed in the buzzing neon glow from the diner sign. For a second he expected, almost feared, to see Megan chasing him down, ready to twist the narrative again. But it was Megan. It was Linda Blake. Ryan's wife. She stood there with her arms wrapped tightly across her body, hair pulled back, face pale under the streetlight. Not angry, not confused, just resigned, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. Daniel exhaled once through his nose and pushed the door open. She stepped back, giving him space. "Linda," he asked quietly. She didn't waste time. "I know where Ryan is tonight," she said, her voice low and steady. "And I think you know too." For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of passing traffic and the faint hum of the diner behind them. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Linda's eyes softened, not with pity but with recognition. "Do you want to talk?" He looked back at Emma sleeping peacefully inside the truck, then at Linda again. Whatever this was, it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional sabotage. She looked like a woman who had finally found the missing puzzle piece she wished she didn't need. Daniel nodded once. They walked to a quieter corner of the lot, far from the lights, where the shadows hid their faces but not their truths. Linda clasped her hands together, staring at the pavement as if gathering courage. "I've suspected it for months," she finally said. "I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that Ryan was just restless, distracted, but not cheating." Her voice wavered on the last word. Not from new pain, this was old pain resurfacing. Daniel kept his gaze steady. "You saw them tonight." "I saw enough," she whispered. "Your wife's car, the bathroom light. I saw his robe through your window." She swallowed tightly. "And I've seen the way he looks at her during neighborhood barbecues, the way he always offers to help when you're working late." Daniel's stomach twisted, not in surprise but in confirmation of what he already knew. This betrayal wasn't sudden. It had roots. Linda reached into her purse with shaking fingers and pulled out a folded envelope. "I didn't come here to make trouble," she said. "I came because you don't deserve to feel blind. I know what that feels like." She handed him the envelope, and when Daniel opened it, he wasn't prepared for how organized it was. Photos, receipts, bank statements, screenshots of messages Linda had recovered from Ryan's cloud backups. Unusual charges during afternoons he claimed to be at client meetings. Credit card payments at bars across town. A receipt for a hotel room he booked on a night he told Linda he was working late. She had been tracking this far longer than he had. Daniel felt a cold weight settle into his hands as he flipped through each piece. Evidence. A trail of carelessness, arrogance, entitlement, just like Megan's. "I confronted him once," Linda said quietly. "He called me paranoid, said I was reading into things. So I stopped asking, and I started watching instead." Daniel nodded. He knew exactly what gaslighting felt like. He had lived it for months without recognizing it until tonight. Linda's voice steadied. "I didn't have proof before, not real proof, but after what I saw tonight, I want the truth, the entire truth, and I think you do too." Daniel looked at her carefully. She wasn't vengeful. She wasn't looking for drama. She was looking for closure. And she wanted it done the right way. "Clean," Daniel said, echoing her unspoken thought. "Legal," she replied. Their eyes met, two blindsided spouses, no longer in the dark. Daniel felt something shift inside him. The rage he carried was still there, sharp and heavy, but now it had direction, structure, a path forward that didn't rely on yelling or retaliation but on facts. On truth. Linda extended her hand. "We help each other. No games, no rumors, just evidence." Daniel shook her hand firmly. Agreed. The wind picked up, rustling the papers still in his grip, reminding him that everything had changed yet again. Another layer peeled back, another mask ripped off. He turned to look at his sleeping daughter inside the truck, and felt the determination harden into something unmistakable. Tonight wasn't just betrayal. It was clarity. And he wasn't alone in it anymore. The porch light was still on when Daniel pulled into the driveway. its weak glow spreading across the front steps like an unwelcome spotlight. He cut the engine and sat there for a breath, holding Emma in his arms. She was completely asleep, her cheek pressed against his shoulder, her body warm and trusting. For a moment he wished he could stay in the truck forever, just him and her, insulated from everything waiting inside that house. But he knew he couldn't avoid it, not tonight, not anymore. He stepped out quietly and carried Emma toward the front door. The house felt different now, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. When he pushed the door open, the faint smell of scented candles hit him, Megan's favorite trick whenever she wanted to mask something. Tonight, it was guilt, or the absence of it. Megan was sitting at the kitchen counter, elbows on the table, her face buried in her hands. When she heard the door close, she lifted her head instantly, eyes already wet, tears sitting too neatly on her lashes. They looked placed, not earned. "Daniel," she breathed out, her voice cracked in the way she used when she wanted sympathy. I didn't think you'd leave like that." He didn't answer, didn't pause. He simply walked past her and up the stairs, taking Emma to her room. He laid her in bed, tucking the blankets around her gently, brushing her hair from her forehead. She didn't stir. The innocence of sleep felt sacred, and stepping back into the hallway felt like walking into contamination. When he came downstairs, Megan was now pacing the kitchen, wiping her cheeks aggressively, trying to sell the performance harder than before. "I was scared," she said as soon as she saw him. "You didn't even let me explain. You ran out like I did something horrible." He opened a drawer slowly, calm, deliberate, and grabbed his phone charger, without a word, without looking at her. The lack of reaction made her voice sharpen. "Daniel, can you stop ignoring me? This isn't fair." Still nothing. He plugged his phone into the wall and tapped the screen. His recording app lit up behind his thumb, already running. He had started the recording before entering the house, just like Carla would later tell him was the smartest thing he ever did. Megan finally snapped. "You know what? This is exactly the problem. You've stopped being romantic. You've been distant for months. What did you expect me to do?" He lifted his eyes then, slowly, and met hers with a calmness that chilled her far more than anger ever could. She faltered, her hands dropped from her chest, her breathing stuttered. Because for the first time she realized he wasn't fighting, he wasn't pleading, he wasn't wounded. He was watching and documenting. She stepped closer, lowering her voice as if gentleness could alter the truth. "Daniel, we've been unhappy, you know that. You work late, you're tired all the time. I just needed attention." He inhaled once through his nose, "And you found it." She blinked, startled by the evenness of his tone. "It's not like that, Ryan and I just—" But whatever excuse she intended to craft died at the sound of the back door creaking open. "Ryan." He appeared halfway through the doorway, trying to be discreet but failing miserably. His shirt was half tucked, half hanging loose. His hair was damp, his face flushed with guilt and embarrassment. He didn't even realize Daniel was in the room until he took another step. Then they locked eyes. Ryan froze like a man caught in a spotlight he never expected. I should go," he muttered, clearing his throat, scratching the back of his neck. Megan's face burned red. "Ryan, go out the back," she hissed through clenched teeth. Ryan slipped outside, shutting the door behind him, but not before casting one more shame-filled glance at Daniel, one that Daniel returned with nothing. No anger, no reaction, just silence, steady and suffocating. Megan spun back toward Daniel, voice rising again. "This is not what it looks like. You're twisting this to make me the villain." He simply stood there, phone screen glowing faintly on the counter, capturing every word. She didn't notice. Her theatrics continued, a mixture of desperation and indignation, while Daniel's mind drifted above it all, detached, analytical, already stepping into the next phase of his plan. He wasn't reacting. He was collecting. He wasn't losing control. He was reclaiming it. And as Megan moved around the kitchen, flinging excuses into the air like fragile glass, Daniel felt something in him shift permanently. The house around him, the home he'd built, repaired, painted, protected, no longer felt like his. It felt like a place where truth had been rotting slowly, quietly under the floorboards. This wasn't home. Not anymore. He unplugged his phone, pocketed it, and walked past her toward the stairs again. "Daniel, where are you going?" she demanded. He didn't answer, because answers were no longer conversations. They would come in evidence, in timelines, in documents, in courtrooms. Tonight marked the first step in the slow, strategic extraction from a marriage that had already ended. Megan was simply the last one to realize it. And as he climbed the last stair, Megan's voice calling behind him, he felt a steadiness settle into his bones. Tomorrow, everything would begin. Daniel arrived at the precinct the next morning with a heaviness that felt carved into his bones. He hadn't slept. He'd only watched the minutes crawl across his phone screen while Emma breathed softly beside him. Every time she stirred, he felt both protective and guilty, as if he should have shielded her from all of this years ago, long before he knew he needed to. He didn't report Megan for cheating. He didn't bring photos of the bathtub. He didn't mention Ryan at all. Infidelity was messy, emotional, subjective. Neglect, that was concrete. And last night had offered more proof than he ever wanted. When he stepped up to the reception counter and asked to file a child welfare concern, the room seemed to shift. Eyes sharpened, questions slowed. The word child always stopped people in their tracks. Detective Harris Cole came out a few minutes later, mid-40s, calm posture, steady eyes that suggested he'd seen more bad parenting than Daniel wanted to imagine. His handshake was firm, not warm. "Let's talk somewhere private," Cole said. Daniel followed him into a small interview room with pale walls and a table that had seen too many confessions. He explained everything with a tight voice. How he'd returned home from work to find Emma crying from hunger, how she'd been left unattended, how her bruise came from a fall no adult had witnessed. He never dramatized, never embellished. Just the truth. Detective Cole listened quietly, jotting down notes with a pen that scratched with clinical detachment. When Daniel finished, Cole leaned back in his chair. "I'll need to interview your daughter," he said. "It'll be gentle, just conversation. She won't know she's being questioned." Daniel nodded, and relief flickered through him, relief mixed with dread. Emma telling the truth meant reliving it. Cole followed Daniel to the small family waiting area where Emma sat coloring with short, clumsy strokes. Daniel knelt down next to her. "Sweetie, this is Detective Cole," he said softly. "He just wants to talk to you about how things are at home." Emma looked up, shy but not afraid. Cole crouched so he was eye level with her, his tone warm but professional. "Hi, Emma, I like your drawing. Who's that?" he asked. "Me and Daddy," she said, holding up a figure with long arms wrapped around a smaller one. "That's very nice," Cole said with a smile. "Can I ask you something? Sometimes kids tell me what it's like when grown-ups get busy. Do you ever have times when you're alone at home?" Emma nodded immediately, not hesitant, not confused, just honest. "Many nights," she said. "Mommy goes in her room with her music loud. Sometimes she leaves. I call her, but she doesn't come." Cole's expression didn't change dramatically, just one eyebrow lifting slightly, a tiny flicker of disturbance that told Daniel everything. This wasn't normal. This wasn't excusable. This was documented neglect from the mouth of a child. Daniel felt a slow exhale leave him, the kind that comes when dread meets confirmation. Cole asked a few more soft questions, never pushing, never inserting ideas. Emma answered each one plainly, describing loneliness as if it were just another part of her nightly routine. When the interview ended, Cole walked Daniel a few steps away, lowering his voice. "That's concerning," he said bluntly. Children don't describe consistent neglect unless it's happening, and she didn't hesitate. That tells me it's normal for her. Daniel swallowed hard. Hearing it phrased clinically hurt worse than hearing it from Emma. We'll need to speak with Megan, Cole added. The timing felt cruel but necessary. Megan arrived at the house shortly afterward, summoned by Cole's request. Her anger arrived before she did. He could hear her through the screen door, shouting that this was harassment, that Daniel was trying to ruin her life. Cole stood calmly in the living room, while Megan paced like a cornered animal. I would never leave my daughter alone, she snapped. Never, this is ridiculous. Cole glanced at his notes. Your daughter says otherwise. She's 7, Megan barked. Kids exaggerate. Daniel's been feeding her stories. This is manipulation. Her voice cracked not from truth but from panic. Cole watched her carefully. Ma'am, your husband is not accusing you of anything other than failing to supervise your child. We're here to ensure her safety. Megan's eyes darted between Daniel and the detective, her story shifting with each sentence. She claimed she was home all night. Then she claimed she stepped out briefly. Then she insisted she left Emma with a neighbor, one whose name she couldn't remember. The contradictions piled up like debris in a flood. When the questioning ended, Cole stepped aside with Daniel quietly. I'm going to be honest, he said. Her explanations don't line up with your daughter's account or with the timeline you provided. He tapped his notebook once with his pen. Document everything, he said firmly. Anytime she leaves, anytime she ignores your daughter, any sign of negligence, record it. Don't confront her, don't provoke her, just keep collecting facts. Daniel nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside him. Not victory, not relief, but momentum. A case wasn't being built. It was building itself. And Megan, without realizing it, had already started handing him the pieces. The house felt different in the days after Detective Cole's visit, quieter, hollow, as though the walls themselves were waiting for something to break. Daniel moved through the rooms with a new kind of awareness, carrying a notebook in his pocket, his phone always ready, his senses sharpened. He wasn't living in his home anymore. He was studying it. He started reviewing the past few months with a clarity he wished he'd had sooner. The missed bedtimes that Megan shrugged off with dramatic sighs. The nights she claimed she was going for a drive to clear her head. The sudden interest in yoga classes she never attended. The unexplained withdrawals. The credit card statements that made no sense. Charges for expensive wine bars, boutique hotels, salons he'd never heard of. Back then he'd tried to believe her excuses. He wanted to believe them. Now he wrote every pattern down. When Megan entered the living room each night, she barely acknowledged either of them. She curled up on the couch with her phone, turning the screen away from him like it was instinct. But what she didn't hide, what she couldn't hide, was the constant lighting up of her notifications. One after another. Buzz, flash, buzz again. Daniel didn't need to see the messages to know who they were from. He logged the timestamps anyway. 8:03 p.m. screen lit up. 8:06 p.m. again. 8:10 p.m. Megan smiled at something she read. Her fingers danced across the screen, quick and familiar. She laughed once, quiet, private, the kind of laugh she hadn't offered Daniel in months. He kept his face neutral, but inside something tightened painfully, like a rope pulled too far. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was the realization that she had emotionally left long before she physically did. His phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Linda. Sending these in case you need them. Attached were screenshots, Ryan's messages to his friends, bragging messages, crude ones where he made light of sneaking around, where he joked about daytime fun, where he implied Megan practically chased him. In one he wrote, "Her husband is clueless, easiest secret I've ever kept." Daniel stared at the words until the letters blurred. Not from tears, he wasn't crying, but from a kind of emotional exhaustion that made his eyes burn. He saved each screenshot in a locked folder, labeling them by date. He didn't respond to Linda right away. He needed a moment to breathe. Across the room, Emma sat at the dining table coloring quietly, her tongue peeking out in concentration. Daniel walked over and eased into the chair beside her. "What are you drawing?" he asked gently. "A family picture," she said brightly. His heart lifted for half a second, until he looked closer. It was him and Emma, just the two of them, holding hands, smiling. "No, Megan." He swallowed hard. "Where's Mommy?" Emma shrugged without looking up. "She's not here a lot, so I didn't put her in." He felt something splinter inside him, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, silent break, a fracture he knew he wouldn't forget for the rest of his life. He looked over at Megan on the couch. She hadn't even glanced in their direction. She was too busy typing, erasing, typing again, smiling at her screen, a world away from the family sitting 10 feet from her. Daniel forced a steady breath and placed a hand on Emma's back. "It's beautiful," he whispered. She grinned proudly. When she returned to coloring, Daniel stepped into the hallway. He leaned against the wall, gripping the edge of his notebook until the cardboard bent under his fingers. Rage wasn't what filled him. Not now. It was something quieter, heavier, grief mixed with clarity. Megan wasn't slipping away. She was already gone. The only part left of their marriage was paperwork and damage control. He opened his notebook again and reviewed the week's entries, missed dinners, ignored phone calls, unanswered knocks on Emma's door, unexplained hours away from home. The list was long, too long, and growing. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Linda. "If you need anything else, I'm here. We're in this together." Daniel stared at the words, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and sorrow. Two people blindsided by the same betrayal, standing on opposite sides of the same collapsing bridge. He closed his notebook. He no longer questioned whether Megan still loved him. That answer had been written in every missed bedtime, every bruise unnoticed, every quiet night where she chose someone else. The question now was simple. What comes next? He ran a hand over his face and exhaled slowly through his nose. The decision settled into him with a cold steadiness. He needed a lawyer. He needed one now. Not for revenge, not for punishment. For Emma. For truth. For the future he refused to let collapse the way his marriage did. Daniel picked up his phone, scrolling past messages, past screenshots, past the reminders of everything he'd lost, and dialed the number he had been avoiding for weeks. A family law attorney. When the line began to ring, he felt the shift, the real beginning, the part where emotion ebbed aside and strategy took over. And somewhere in the living room, Megan's phone lit up again. Buzz. 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 She didn't even notice him watching. Daniel didn't know what to expect when he stepped into Carla Boyd's office the next morning. The building was tucked between a mortgage lender and a dental clinic, ordinary on the outside. But the moment he walked through the glass door, everything felt different. Quiet, controlled, serious, like stepping into a place where consequences were shaped. Carla's assistant led him down a hall lined with framed court decisions and photos of Carla shaking hands with judges. Daniel felt out of place in his worn jacket and calloused hands, but he reminded himself he wasn't here for pride. He was here for Emma. When Carla finally entered the conference room, she moved with the confidence of someone who had already seen the worst of people and learned not to flinch. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her glasses sat low on her nose as she extended her hand. "Mr. Foster," she said, voice low and steady, "let's take a look at what you've brought." Daniel laid his folder on the table, photos of Emma's bruise, screenshots of texts, timestamps, the diner witnesses statement, notes from Detective Cole's visit. Carla flipped through each page with sharp, precise movements. Her expression tightened gradually, the faintest crease forming between her eyebrows. When she finally closed the folder, she leaned back in her chair. "This isn't just a divorce case," she said plainly. "This is a child neglect case." Daniel swallowed hard. Hearing it spoken aloud by someone who didn't know him, someone who practiced law for a living, made the truth feel heavier. Carla continued, "Neglect isn't about bad parents having bad days. It's about patterns, repeated absence, failure to supervise, a child who is consistently left without care." She tapped the folder with a single finger. "Your evidence shows exactly that." Daniel nodded slowly, though part of him still resisted. "She wasn't always like this," he murmured. "I don't know when it changed." "That's common," Carla said. "People don't fall apart all at once. They drift first." Her tone wasn't judgmental, just factual, clinical, the way someone speaks when they've guided hundreds of people through the same storm. Carla pulled a legal pad closer. "Here's what you need to document next," she said. "Every time she leaves the house, every time she ignores your daughter, record conversations when legally permissible, keep timestamps, keep witnesses. If you see anything that puts Emma at risk, no matter how small, write it down." Daniel nodded again, more firmly this time, grateful for the structure, grateful for someone who wasn't second-guessing him. Carla continued, "Based on what I'm seeing, we're filing for emergency temporary custody. You'll retain physical custody of Emma while the court reviews the risk factors." The words hit Daniel with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that Emma would be safe. Fear of what this would ignite. "Emergency custody means Megan will be served within days," Carla added. "She may react violently, emotionally, not physically, but you must stay calm. Do not argue. Do not respond to provocation." Daniel hesitated, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the chair. "I never wanted to take Emma away from her mother." Carla looked at him over her glasses. "Your daughter needs safety," she said, her voice unwavering. "Megan will have supervised visitation. She will not be cut out. But until she can demonstrate responsible behavior, Emma stays with you." Daniel exhaled slowly. It wasn't triumph he felt. It wasn't even anger. It was responsibility, heavy, unavoidable, and grounding. As Carla began drafting the custodial petition, Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw Linda's name. A new message. He opened it discreetly under the table. "Sending recordings. You'll want these. He doesn't know I have them." Attached were audio clips. Ryan's voice unmistakable, complaining to a friend about Megan's parenting. "Her kid always cries. She just sticks her in front of the TV. I'm not trying to play dad," he said in one recording, dripping with irritation. In another, Ryan laughed and added, "If CPS ever showed up, she'd lose that kid. She barely watches her." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of quiet anger roll through him. Not the explosive kind. The focused, tired, human kind, anger shaped by truth. He handed the phone to Carla. She listened in silence, then pressed stop. "This," she said flatly, "is invaluable." She added the recordings to the growing stack of evidence in front of her, organizing everything meticulously. "Mr. Foster," she said, folding her hands on the table, "we're going to end this clean and permanent." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle into his spine. Clean, permanent, not vengeful, protective. He nodded. "Tell me what to do next." "Carla slid the custody paperwork toward him. "Sign where I've highlighted, and from this moment on, keep gathering the truth." As Daniel picked up the pen, he thought of Emma's drawing, the one missing a mother. He thought of the bruise on her arm. He thought of Megan laughing in a bathtub while their child cried for food. And he signed. The line was steady. Final. Bound to a future he didn't ask for but was ready to face. By the time he left Carla's office, the sky outside had darkened, and his phone buzzed again with a single message, from Megan this time. "We need to talk, now." Daniel stared at the screen, feeling the shift in the air. The next phase had begun. Daniel didn't expect the night to unravel the way it did. He had hoped, quietly, foolishly, that Megan would tread carefully after Detective Cole's questioning. That maybe fear would make her pause, reconsider, act like a mother again. But patterns don't break just because truth knocks on the door. It was nearly 8 when Megan came downstairs wearing a tight top, perfume thick in the air, her hair still damp from a hurried shower. She moved quickly, avoiding Daniel's eyes. She only slowed when Emma asked from the couch, "Mommy, where are you going?" Megan didn't even pretend to soften her tone. "Out, I won't be long." Then she grabbed her purse and left. No kiss goodnight. No check-in with Daniel. No dinner cleaned up. Nothing. The door shut with a sharp click that echoed through the quiet house. Daniel picked up his phone, opened his notes, and documented the time. 8:12 p.m. Megan left the house. Emma unattended. Then he called Mrs. Hathaway next door, the retired teacher who had watched Emma a few times in emergencies. She answered on the second ring. "Could you stay available tonight?" he asked. "Just in case I need a witness." She didn't ask questions. "I'm here, Daniel, whatever you need." He thanked her quietly. Upstairs, Emma slept deeply, the kind of sleep small children fall into when their routines are finally calm. Daniel checked the baby monitor, clicked on the recording function, and kept his phone in hand. Every detail mattered now. At 9:04 p.m. Emma stirred. At 9:05 she whimpered. At 9:06 the crying came, soft at first, then breaking open like a small storm. Daniel climbed the stairs quickly but gently, pushing open her door. Emma sat up in bed, hair tangled, cheeks wet. "I had a bad dream," she whispered, reaching for him. He lifted her into his arms, settling into the rocking chair by the window. She curled into him instantly, her breathing shaky, her hands gripping his shirt as if she feared he might disappear too. "It's okay," he murmured, brushing a thumb along her cheek. "Daddy's here, I'm right here." He let the moment sit, comfort first, evidence second. When she calmed, he checked the monitor's timestamp. 9:14 p.m. Child awake crying. No parent in home except father. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't editorialize. He wrote exactly what happened, exactly as it occurred. He snapped a quiet photo of the digital clock behind Emma's bed, proof of the time she woke alone. By 10:30, she was asleep again. By 11, Megan still wasn't home. By midnight, the first ache of anger began pulsing behind Daniel's ribs, not loud, not wild, but tired, bone deep, the kind of anger that no longer wanted explanations. He sat at the table, lights low, listening to the hum of the refrigerator until the sound of a car door thudded outside. 12:47 a.m. He clicked record. The front door opened with a fumbling yank. Megan staggered inside, one heel catching on the rug, the other dragging behind her. Her hair was messy now, makeup smudged beneath her eyes. She smelled like cheap vodka and someone else's cologne. "Daniel," she called out, voice slurred, "why are the lights so bright?" He didn't answer. He simply raised his phone slightly, angling the camera toward her as she stumbled forward. She didn't notice. She tried to toss her purse onto the counter, but it slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud, hollow thud. The clasp broke open on impact, spilling everything across the tile: lipstick, receipts, tangled earbuds. And condoms. A box of them. A few loose packets scattered out like bitter confetti. Megan froze. Daniel didn't move. His phone didn't move. The silence in the kitchen became suffocating, thick with everything she could no longer deny. Megan blinked slowly, as if drunk confusion could shield her from evidence lying at her feet. "It's not what it looks like," she mumbled, reaching down too late, too clumsily. But the difference between tonight and every night before was simple. Daniel didn't need her to admit anything. The proof was right there, clear, recorded, undeniable. He ended the video, slid the phone into his pocket, and stepped away from her without a word. Megan reached out, hand wobbling in the air, her expression crumbling into something desperate and small. "Daniel, please." He didn't look back. He simply walked toward the stairs, the weight of finality settling into his spine. He now had everything he needed. And by morning, the rest would begin. Daniel didn't sleep. Not after the purse hit the floor. Not after the condoms scattered across the tile. Not after Megan's slurred lies she could no longer keep straight. He waited until dawn painted a thin gray ribbon across the horizon, then drove straight to Carla Boyd's office with the videos, timestamps, and every piece of documentation he'd collected. Carla didn't waste a second. She reviewed the footage with a tight jaw and eyes that grew colder by the minute. Then she picked up the phone, called her paralegal, and said 3 words that changed the pace of everything. "File it now." By mid-morning, the emergency custody motion had been submitted. By early afternoon, Megan received her welfare notification, an official alert that she was under investigation for child neglect. Daniel wasn't there when she opened the envelope, but he heard it. Her scream echoed through the house like something feral. "What did you do?" she shrieked, storming into the living room where Daniel was helping Emma get her backpack ready for school. "You went behind my back. You're trying to take my daughter away from me." Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even turn fully toward her. He kept one hand steady on Emma's shoulder as he said quietly, "This is because of your choices, Megan, not mine." That sentence sent her spiraling. "You sabotaged me," she spat. "You set me up. You're doing this because you can't stand the fact that I needed more than what you gave me." Emma pressed closer to Daniel, tiny fingers gripping his shirt. Megan didn't seem to notice, or didn't care, too consumed by panic, by the sudden realization that her behavior had real consequences. Then, as if on cue from a cruel director, her phone buzzed. "Ryan." His name flashed on the screen, but only once. Then a second message appeared, then a third. Megan's breath hitched as she opened them. Daniel didn't need to see the words to know what they said. Ryan was pulling away, distancing himself, protecting his own skin. It hit Megan like a slap, her expression twisted, confusion bleeding into fear. "He says he can't be involved in anything legal," she muttered. "He says this is too much." Daniel remained silent. Watching her world collapse wasn't satisfying. It was simply predictable. An hour later, Detective Harris Cole knocked on the door. Megan stiffened instantly. "You again," she snapped. Cole stepped inside with the same calm professionalism he carried during every interview. "Mrs. Foster, I need to ask you a few follow-up questions based on new information." "Are you kidding me?" Megan exploded. "This is harassment. Daniel is feeding you lies and you're eating them up." Cole didn't react to her anger. Instead, he opened his notebook. "You stated last time that you are home with your daughter every evening unless you step out briefly. Is that correct?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. Daniel watched the small tick in Cole's jaw, the giveaway that he already knew the truth. Cole continued, "Were you home last night between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m.? Megan blinked. "Of course I was." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. He only looked down at Emma, who was holding his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Foster, we have timestamps and video evidence showing otherwise, and your husband documented your daughter waking up crying while you were not in the home." Megan's face drained. That's not Daniel made that up." Cole's tone stayed even. The documentation is consistent, and your explanation doesn't match it." Megan sputtered, grasping for excuses that dissolved as quickly as they formed. I was running errands. I was at the pharmacy." "Between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m., Cole asked. Yes, maybe." Her voice cracked on the last word. Cole closed his notebook with a quiet, definitive sound. "Mrs. Foster, based on these inconsistencies and the evidence provided, the court has approved temporary emergency custody to Mr. Foster pending full investigation." Megan staggered back as if the air had been knocked out of her. "No, no, you can't do that. She's my daughter." Emma buried her face against Daniel's side, trembling. Daniel bent slightly, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart, I'm right here." His voice stayed calm, but inside his chest a cold ache tightened, grief for what Emma had to witness, determination for what he had to protect. Megan paced, clutching her head, muttering accusations, none of which made sense anymore. Ryan wasn't answering her calls. Her story had collapsed under its own weight, and the reality of losing control settled on her like a sentence she never believed would come. Cole handed Daniel the official documents. "Mr. Foster, you have full physical custody effective immediately. Mrs. Foster will receive supervised visitation until further. Our notice." Megan pressed her palm to her mouth, tears streaking down her face, not the performative ones from before, but the raw, panicked kind born from consequences. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't celebrate. He only held Emma a little tighter. Because the first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And tomorrow, everything would move to the courtroom. The neighborhood had always been quiet, manicured lawns, polite waves, weekend barbecues where everyone pretended their lives were better than they were. But that morning, the calm shattered like thin glass. Daniel was in the driveway buckling Emma into her seat for school when he heard raised voices coming from 2 houses down, the Blake residence. He recognized the voices instantly. Linda's, sharp and cutting. Ryan's, defensive and cracking under pressure. He didn't move closer, but he didn't look away either. Neither did the rest of the neighborhood. Curtains shifted. Garage doors paused mid-closing. People hovered behind hedges pretending to check mail. The war had gone public. Linda stood at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. Ryan hovered a few feet away, his face blotched red, hair messy, shirt half tucked like he'd rushed outside to contain damage that had already escaped. "You lied to me," Linda said, voice firm but controlled. "Not once, not twice, for months." Ryan shook his head too quickly. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't Linda, she came onto me. I didn't pursue anything." Daniel recognized the tone instantly. The cowardly scramble of a man trying to rewrite a story seconds before it collapses. Linda didn't flinch. "So the charges on our joint card were accidents. The hotel stays. The daytime fun you bragged about." Her voice carried, the words slicing through the morning air. Ryan's jaw slackened. He hadn't realized she'd found the screenshots. Neighbors whispered. Someone gasped. Another man muttered, "Unbelievable." Ryan looked around, painfully aware of the audience. He straightened, attempting control. "This is private, Linda. We don't need to put on a show." "It stopped being private," she said, "when you started parading around the neighborhood like you couldn't be touched." Daniel felt no satisfaction watching it, only inevitability. Ryan's composure broke entirely when Megan appeared, hair tangled, clothes wrinkled, eyes swollen from a night of panicked crying. She jogged across the yard in bare feet, calling, "Ryan, Ryan, please, can we talk?" The entire neighborhood stiffened. Even Ryan froze, stunned she had the nerve to approach him here now, with witnesses and consequences stacked around him like live wires. "Megan, go home," he hissed under his breath. "Not now." She reached for him. "I just need you to tell them it wasn't what it looked like, that I wasn't a bad mother, that." Ryan stepped back as if her touch burned him. Are you insane? I'm already in deep enough. I'm not getting dragged into your legal mess. Linda let out a humorless laugh. Of course, when things get ugly, you run. Megan's face crumpled. She looked from Ryan to Linda, then toward Daniel, who stood still beside the car, hands in his pockets, gaze unreadable. Daniel, she pleaded, taking a step toward him, eyes wide with a desperation that came too late. You're twisting everything. You're making me into a monster. Please just talk to me. But the man she had once expected to absorb every blow, every insult, every lie wasn't there anymore. Daniel didn't step forward. He didn't comfort her. He didn't rescue her from the consequences she had created. He simply lifted his phone and tapped the recording app, not obviously, not vindictively, just calmly. Because Megan was unraveling and her unraveling mattered. What are you doing? She cried, voice cracking. Are you filming me? Seriously, Daniel. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Her screaming, her panic, her contradictions, every piece was evidence now. Megan clutched her head with shaking hands. Everyone's turning against me. Ryan won't help. Linda hates me. And you, she pointed at Daniel, trembling. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You want to watch me break. But Daniel's face remained steady. No joy, no cruelty, just distance. The emotional tie had been severed cleanly. Seeing his silence, his refusal to engage, made something inside Megan snap. She stormed back toward the house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The echo lingered over the neighborhood, a punctuation mark at the end of a life she'd taken for granted until it disappeared beneath her feet. Emma tugged Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, is Mommy okay? Daniel knelt, brushing a hand over her hair. Mommy's upset, but you're safe. That's what matters. He buckled her in and closed the door gently. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat across from Carla Boyd in her office as she reviewed the latest footage. She took notes rapidly, eyes narrowing at each detail. Megan's meltdown, the public confrontation, the neighbor witnesses. This strengthens our position, Carla said. But now we prepare for financial disclosure. Every account, every debt, every transfer she's made in the last year. Daniel exhaled slowly. The emotional war had shifted into a financial one. And Megan, he asked. Carla folded her hands. Fear is turning into desperation. Expect her to act erratically. Don't engage, don't debate, document everything. Daniel nodded. Because the war wasn't just exploding. It was accelerating. And tomorrow, the fallout would land squarely in court. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnished wood and old paper, the kind of place where decisions outlast the people who make them. Daniel walked through the double doors with Carla at his side, Emma's small photo tucked safely in his pocket like an anchor. He wasn't nervous. Not anymore. The weeks leading to this moment had stripped the fear from him, leaving only clarity. Megan arrived minutes later. Her appearance was polished, too polished, hair curled, dress press. Makeup layered to mask the sleeplessness beneath. But the veneer cracked the moment she stepped inside. Her eyes twitched toward Daniel, then away. Her hands fidgeted around the straps of her purse. She looked like someone trying to play the role of a devoted mother but forgetting the lines halfway through. Carla leaned toward Daniel, murmuring, "She looks unstable. Judges notice what people think they're hiding." Daniel gave the slightest nod, keeping his gaze forward. When the clerk called their case, they stepped into a courtroom that felt colder than the hallway. At the bench sat Judge Marlowe, stern-eyed, mid-50s, the kind of judge who didn't care about theatrics or emotional performances. Only facts. Carla began with those facts. As soon as she stood, her voice filled the room, steady, precise. She presented a timeline built with the care of an architect, timestamp after timestamp, photographs of Emma's bruise, screenshots of unanswered calls, documentation of nights Megan was away. Witness statements from the diner waitress, from Mrs. Hathaway, from others who had seen the neglect firsthand. Then came the videos. The footage of Megan stumbling home intoxicated, the audio of Emma crying alone, Megan's meltdown in the yard. Each piece played silently on the courtroom screen, but the impact was deafening. Megan shifted in her chair, her breath shallow, her polished composure crumbling with every new exhibit. Her attorney leaned forward repeatedly to whisper instructions, but nothing could help the fact that the evidence contradicted her narrative before she even spoke. When it was their turn, Megan's attorney approached the bench with a stack of disorganized notes. "Your Honor, my client insists she has always provided adequate care for her daughter. These recordings, taken out of context, misrepresent her commitment as a mother." Judge Marlowe raised a brow. "We will determine context." The attorney swallowed and continued. "These instances were isolated, exaggerated. Mr. Foster is attempting to weaponize minor imperfections during a tense marital period." Carla stood, her expression frost-sharp. "Your Honor, the evidence reflects patterns, not imperfections." She placed her hand on the stack of documents. "Neglect doesn't happen in isolated snapshots. It unfolds over time, and this record shows exactly that." Megan's attorney sputtered, flipping through pages that didn't align with each other. At last, he called Megan to the stand. She sat up straighter, smoothing her skirt, but when she began speaking, her voice trembled. She claimed she was always home. Then she said she'd left only once. Then she said she'd left, but just for an hour. The contradictions piled one on top of another, each more fragile than the last. The judge took notes, expression unreadable. Carla rose again. "Mrs. Foster, did you or did you not leave your daughter unsupervised the night of October 29th? Megan blinked rapidly. I don't remember, maybe briefly, but Daniel came home early and—" "Did you or did you not return intoxicated?" Carla asked. "That he filmed me without my consent. I was upset. Anyone would be." "And the condom packets that fell out of your purse?" Megan's mouth opened, then closed. Her attorney tried to intervene, objection, relevance, but Judge Marlowe overruled him with a slow shake of her head. The unraveling had begun. Next, Detective Harris Cole took the stand. Daniel felt Emma's drawing in his pocket again, grounding him as Cole testified. He explained Emma's statements, her calm admission of being left alone many nights. He described Megan's inconsistencies, her evasive answers, the troubling behavior during questioning. "Based on my professional assessment," Cole concluded, "there is legitimate concern for the child's safety under Mrs. Foster's unsupervised care." Megan's attorney attempted damage control. "Detective, children exaggerate. Isn't it possible?" Cole cut him off gently but firmly. "Children don't fabricate patterns. They repeat what they live." The air thickened. Then came the most painful part, not emotionally but strategically. Ryan Blake was called. He didn't even enter the courtroom. Instead, his attorney stood and stated flatly, "Mr. Blake declines to testify on behalf of Mrs. Foster." No explanation, no support. Megan's shoulders slumped forward, as if the floor itself had tilted beneath her. Judge Marlowe watched everything, the contradictions, the panic, the desperation. The judge's pen slowed as she closed her notebook and folded her hands. "This court is deeply concerned," she said, her voice carrying the weight of finality. "The evidence suggests a pattern of neglect that cannot be ignored." Megan whimpered softly. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, didn't let anything flicker across his face. He sat steady, controlled, unshakable. The judge's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, as if acknowledging the restraint it took to stay composed while watching a family unravel. The gavel didn't fall yet, but the decision was already forming in the judge's eyes. And everyone in the room felt it. The second day of the custody hearing carried a different kind of heaviness, one that clung to the courtroom like a lingering storm. Everyone felt it. The judge, the attorneys, the quiet spectators pretending not to listen. Even the bailiff watched Megan a little too closely, sensing the unraveling that had started the day before. Megan sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her polished appearance now betraying hairline cracks. Her hands kept twisting the fabric of her skirt. She looked at the door every few seconds, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Ryan. When the judge entered and called the session to order, Megan's attorney cleared his throat and announced that Megan wished to make a statement. Carla didn't object. She didn't need to. The judge nodded. Mrs. Foster, proceed. Megan rose slowly, smoothing her dress as though it could still hold her together. Her voice trembled at first, but desperation pushed her forward. Your Honor, she began, I made mistakes, but I wasn't acting alone. Ryan Blake, my neighbor, he pressured me into everything. He kept showing up, kept calling, kept interfering in my marriage. A murmur drifted through the courtroom. Daniel remained still, his face unreadable. Megan continued, voice rising, I never wanted any of this. Ryan followed me around. He manipulated me. He took advantage of me. And now he refuses to testify because he knows he'd look guilty too. The judge leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled. Mrs. Foster, are you claiming coercion? Yes, Megan blurted. Absolutely, he ruined my family. It was a clean, sharp attempt to shift blame, except it didn't align with any evidence presented. The judge knew it. Carla knew it. Daniel knew it. Even Megan's own attorney looked uneasy, adjusting his glasses as if they were suddenly too tight. Judge Marlowe spoke carefully. Mrs. Foster, your first duty is to your child. Yet your statements today reflect concern with your neighbor, your reputation, and your marital conflict, not the welfare of your daughter. Do you understand why that concerns this court? Megan blinked rapidly. I love my daughter, I do. I was just overwhelmed, I needed. Her voice cracked, and in the silence between her words the judge's concern deepened. Not sympathy, concern. Realizing she was losing ground, Megan's composure shattered. Tears streamed freely now, loud, choking sobs echoing off the courtroom walls. She looked around desperately, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in on her behalf. No one did. Emotion alone couldn't counter timestamps or video evidence. Carla rose smoothly. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to enter one more set of documents. The judge nodded. Carla approached the bench and laid down printed financial statements, pages highlighted in thick yellow lines. This is a summary of Mrs. Foster's withdrawals and credit card activity over the last 6 months. Megan stiffened. Her crying faltered. Carla continued, her voice calm but damning. During this period, over $8,000 were removed from the joint marital account without Mr. Foster's knowledge. Charges include hotel stays, salon visits, bar tabs, and luxury purchases that Mrs. Foster cannot attribute to household expenses. Gasps spread across the courtroom. Megan shook her head violently. That money isn't, that's not, those were for. For your daughter, Carla asked gently. Megan's silence said everything. Carla folded her hands. These funds were used while the child, Emma Foster, was repeatedly left unsupervised. Mrs. Foster prioritized personal indulgence over the safety of her daughter. Megan stumbled backward into her chair. Her attorney attempted damage control, whispering frantically, but she shoved his hand away. No, she shouted. You people are twisting everything. Yes, I went out. Yes, I bought things. I was unhappy. I needed space. Daniel wasn't supportive. And Emma. She hesitated. The room froze. What about Emma, Mrs. Foster? Judge Marlowe asked quietly. Megan's shoulders collapsed. I left her alone only sometimes, she whispered. The courtroom inhaled sharply as one. Even Megan realized what she had said too late. Her eyes widened in horror, as though she'd heard the words for the first time. Judge Marlowe leaned back in her chair, the weight of the admission settling into the solemn air. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, though her tone carried no warmth. "Your statement has been noted." Megan covered her face with both hands, shaking as though her own confession had pierced something deeper than embarrassment. Daniel watched her without triumph, without anger, without pity, just certainty. The case wasn't officially decided yet, but he knew, everyone knew, it was effectively won. Emma's future had already shifted. All that remained now was the judgment. Judge Marlowe closed T. He filed with a deliberate, echoing snap. "This court will reconvene shortly to issue a temporary custody ruling. Be prepared." Daniel exhaled slowly. The end was coming. And so was everything that came after. When Judge Marlowe returned to the bench, the air in the courtroom shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no thunderous silence or gasping audience, just a tightening, a collective breath drawn and held with the expectation that the next words spoken would define the future of a child. Daniel sat with his hands clasped loosely in his lap. Carla sat beside him, posture straight, eyes fixed on the judge with the focus of someone who had built an unshakable case brick by brick. Megan, across the aisle, looked hollowed out. Her mascara smudged, lips trembling, posture wilted. She wasn't polished anymore. She wasn't performing. She was simply waiting and terrified. Judge Marlowe cleared her throat. After reviewing all evidence presented, including documentation, witness statements, and testimony regarding the safety and well-being of the minor child, Emma Foster. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He didn't blink. "The court finds substantial concern regarding Mrs. Foster's ability to provide adequate supervision at this time." Megan let out a small gasp, hand clenching her attorney's sleeve. Judge Marlowe continued, unwavering. "Therefore, effective immediately, full physical custody is granted to Mr. Daniel Foster." The words landed like a gavel before it even fell. Megan shook her head violently. "No, no, please, Your Honor. I can explain. Please don't do this." The judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Foster, you will have supervised visitation only, 2 times per week, scheduled to be determined by the court-appointed monitor." Megan let out a strangled sob. Her attorney whispered urgently, but she shoved him away, eyes locked on Daniel with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. And the judge added, "Mr. Foster is granted exclusive possession of the marital residence until further financial proceedings are resolved." Megan collapsed into her chair as if her bones had melted. "He took everything from me," she whispered hoarsely. "Everything." But the judge wasn't finished. "Mrs. Foster, you will participate in a parenting improvement program and submit to routine welfare check-ins. Compliance is mandatory if you wish to pursue unsupervised visitation in the future." The gavel struck once, sharp, final, echoing. Court adjourned. For a moment, no one moved. Then Megan erupted. She stumbled to her feet, pointing at Daniel with a shaking hand. "You ruined my life. You destroyed our family. You did this, Daniel. You're heartless. You wanted me gone." Her voice cracked into a scream. The bailiff stepped closer instinctively, ready to intervene. Daniel didn't look at her, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Carla placed a firm hand on his arm and leaned in. "Walk out, now. Don't engage, don't look back." Her voice was calm but commanding, the voice of someone who had seen good men lose everything by reacting at the wrong time. Daniel nodded and stood, gathering his documents with steady hands. Megan lunged forward slightly as if to follow him, but the bailiff gently blocked her path. "Ma'am, that's enough," he said softly. Daniel walked toward the exit, every step deliberate. Megan's screaming dulled behind him but didn't disappear. "You can't take her from me. Daniel, answer me. Don't walk away from me." Carla walked beside him, her presence quiet but strong. "This is the right outcome," she said. "You did what you had to do." As they stepped into the hallway, Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from Linda. "Congratulations. Justice finally caught up. Emma's lucky to have you." Daniel exhaled, the first real breath he had taken in hours. He typed back a simple thank you, not out of celebration but acknowledgement. Two people who had survived the same storm from opposite shores. Later that evening, word spread through the neighborhood faster than any gossip ever had. Ryan's car disappeared from his driveway. His house fell dark, his curtains drawn, his social media accounts vanished. It was as if he had folded himself into the shadows and slipped out the back of his own life. No farewells. No explanations. No trace. Cowards rarely linger when consequences arrive. Daniel didn't waste a thought on him. His focus was on Emma. He drove to the school, picked her up with the custody papers still in his glove compartment, and saw her face brighten the moment she spotted him. She ran into his arms, her backpack bouncing behind her. "Daddy," she said, breathless, "you're early." "Yeah," he said softly, lifting her. "I am." She wrapped her arms around his neck, the sweet innocence of her trust soothing wounds he hadn't realized were still open. When they got home, he unlocked the front door, not with hesitance this time, but with ownership, with purpose. The house felt different. Safe. Quiet. Their own again. Emma skipped into the living room, humming. G to herself, unaware of the storms that had broken and passed. Daniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, absorbing the stillness, the kind of stillness that wasn't hollow anymore. The kind of stillness that meant peace was finally possible. But a strange truth lingered in his chest. The court battle was over. The rebuilding had only just begun. The locksmith finished just after sunrise, the last metal click echoing through the entryway with a finality Daniel felt in his bones. The new locks gleamed against the doorframe, quiet, simple, unremarkable to anyone else. But to Daniel they meant safety, control, a line drawn firmly between the past and whatever came next. "Should be good now," the locksmith said, handing him the new set of keys. Daniel nodded, slipping them into his palm, gripping them tightly. "Thank you." When the truck pulled away, the house fell silent. Not the heavy, suffocating silence it used to hold, but a clean one, a beginning. Emma padded into the hallway in her socks, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, why are the keys different?" He crouched down so they were eye level. "Because it's our home now," he said gently, "just ours, and we're making it safe." She smiled sleepily, accepting the explanation with the simple trust only a child could carry. After breakfast, Daniel began the part he had been dreading, the clearing out. Megan's belongings still filled closets, drawers, shelves. The scent of her perfume clung to the master bedroom like a stubborn shadow. He didn't want Emma doing this alone. He didn't want her exposed to the mess of adult mistakes. So he waited until she settled at the kitchen table with crayons before starting. He approached the wardrobe first. Blouses, dresses, glittering shoes Megan had insisted she needed for events she never explained. Each piece he folded carefully, not out of nostalgia but out of respect for the rules Carla had laid out. No damage, no disposal, everything documented before moving. He took photos, logged each item, packed them into boxes he stacked neatly by the door. Removing her presence from the house didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary, like cleaning mold from a place that needed sunlight again. Midway through clearing the dresser, a small voice floated in from the hallway. "Can I help?" Emma stood holding a handful of markers, smiling up at him. "Help with what?" he asked, softening. "Making the house pretty." He chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, sweetheart, you can help with that part." They went to the living room together. Daniel pulled out old Dacre, neutral tones Megan had insisted on, colors that muted the house rather than warming it. Emma held up paint swatches she had collected from a small booklet, bright yellows, soft blues, greens like spring leaves. "I like these," she said proudly. "So do I," Daniel replied, and he meant it. The colors felt alive, uncomplicated, honest, everything the house hadn't been for years. As she arranged the swatches across the coffee table, Daniel stepped into the office to gather financial documents Carla had requested. That's when he saw it. A stack of envelopes tucked in the back of the desk drawer, credit card statements, unopened, months old. He pulled the first one out, then another. Each envelope felt heavier than the last. When he finally tore one open, his stomach tightened. Charges on cards he didn't know existed, balances maxed out, cash advances, interest stacking like bricks on a sinking foundation. Thousands of dollars in debt. Megan's debt. Debt tied to their joint account. He closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, forcing the weight of the discovery to settle without crushing him. Betrayal took many forms. This one was financial, a quiet sabotage that had been happening behind his back long before the bathtub, long before the lies. He took photos of the statements and sent them directly to Carla with a short message. "Found these, what now?" Her response arrived quickly. "We proceed with financial recovery. Don't touch anything else. Bring all documents to my office tomorrow. We'll ensure the debt is separated." Daniel exhaled slowly. Another fire to put out, another mess to clean. He returned to the living room, but before he could sit, his phone buzzed again, this time with Megan's name. A string of messages appeared, each more frantic than the last. "We need to talk. Please answer me. I know you're angry, but we can fix this. We can start over. Daniel, I'm losing everything. Don't do this to us." He read each line, his expression unmoved. Emotional manipulation was Megan's oldest tool. Tears when convenient, silence when not. Pleading now because consequences had cornered her. He typed nothing. He locked the phone. And for the first time, the guilt didn't return. The hesitation didn't whisper. He felt only a calm certainty, the kind that comes when truth has already been laid bare and there is nothing left to argue about. "Daddy, look," Emma called. He turned to see her taping color swatches along the wall, arranging them in little rows. She beamed with pride. "This one makes the house happy." Daniel smiled, a real one this time. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it really does." As Emma went back to coloring, Daniel surveyed the house. The cleaned corners, the boxes by the door, the new colors waiting to be chosen. The rot had been removed. But rebuilding, that would be the real work. And tomorrow, everything would shift again. The request came in the middle of a quiet afternoon, an unexpected vibration on Daniel's phone, while he was helping Emma sort her toys into new storage bins. The message was from Megan. "I want to talk. We need to figure out co-parenting. Please, just one meeting." Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment. The old version of him, the man who once stretched himself thin to keep a broken marriage together, might have answered immediately. But that man didn't exist anymore. What remained was someone steadier, someone who protected Emma first and himself second. He showed the message to Carla before replying. "SH." He nodded. "If you choose to meet her, do it in public, neutral ground, and don't go alone." Daniel didn't want company, he didn't need backup, but he understood the advice. Public meant controlled, public meant calm. He typed, "We can meet at the Lakeside Cafe at 4. I'll stay for 30 minutes, nothing more." The appointment felt like closing a chapter he hadn't wanted to touch again. When Daniel arrived at the cafe, it buzzed with mid-afternoon chatter, students tapping on laptops, retirees sharing pastries, the hiss of the espresso machine filling the air. It was the right place for something delicate and dangerous. Megan was already seated by the window. She looked different, Not polished like she had in court, not frantic like during her meltdown. Just drained. A shell of the woman Daniel had once known. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup she hadn't sipped from, fingers trembling slightly as she glanced up. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Daniel sat across from her, posture composed, hands resting loosely on the table. "You said you wanted to discuss co-parenting." Megan nodded quickly, tears already gathering. "Yes, I want us to try for Emma. I want to be better. I know I messed up. I know I made mistakes." Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth with her hand as tears spilled over. The crying came fast, raw, but Daniel had learned long ago that tears didn't always mean truth. He waited. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "For everything, for the affair, for leaving Emma alone, for lying. I was lost, Daniel. I was stupid. I didn't realize how far things had gone." He let the words hang between them, an apology suspended by desperation. "You must hate me," she whispered. Daniel shook his head once. "I don't hate you," he said quietly, "but I don't trust you, not with our daughter, not with us." Megan winced as if the words physically struck her. She reached across the table, but Daniel didn't move his hand. She hesitated, then withdrew. "I know I hurt you," she said. "But I loved you, Daniel. I did. I felt invisible. And Ryan." She stopped, breath stuttering. Daniel's voice remained steady. "This isn't about you and me. It's about Emma." Megan nodded again, swallowing a sob. "I know, and I want to be better for her." She wiped her cheeks, smearing mascara. "But everything is falling apart. You don't understand. Ryan, he left me. The second the judge announced custody, he just disappeared." There it was. The shift. Daniel watched her carefully, not with anger but with clarity. The grief in her voice wasn't about betrayal. It was about abandonment, consequences, losing the life she had chosen over her family. "He won't even answer my calls," she continued, voice breaking. "He said he doesn't want to be connected to any legal trouble. That being with me was a mistake." Daniel lowered his eyes, not out of sympathy, but because the truth had revealed itself completely. She wasn't apologizing for what she'd done. She was apologizing for what she'd lost. "I'm alone now, Daniel," she whispered, "and I don't know what to do." The sentence hung there, trembling, heavy with expectation. Daniel inhaled slowly. "Megan, you being lonely doesn't change what happened. It doesn't rewrite the decisions you made." She shook her head wildly. "So that's it, you won't forgive me." "I'm not here to punish you," he said. "But forgiveness isn't a tool. It's not something handed out to erase consequences. You're apologizing because you're scared, not because you understand what Emma went through." Her face crumpled and she pressed her palms to her forehead. People at nearby tables shifted, pretending not to watch. Daniel stood. "Co-parenting can happen," he said, "but it will happen through the court, through structure, through accountability, not through private conversations trying to undo what's already been done." Megan lifted her head, tears streaking her skin. "Daniel, please don't walk away. Don't leave me like this." He looked at her, really looked. At the woman he had loved, the woman who had betrayed him, the woman who now sat shattered not by guilt, but by consequences she never thought she'd face. And he understood, finally, that the man she wanted him to be no longer existed. "I hope you get the help you need," he said, "but I'm choosing peace for me and for Emma." Then he turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Megan behind with her cooling cup of coffee and the apology that had arrived too late to matter. Outside, the cold breeze hit his face, bracing and honest. For the first time in months, Daniel felt the future opening. Not clean, not simple, but his. Ryan Blake had always carried himself like the neighborhood golden boy, smug confidence, perfect lawn, the kind of man who believed rules were for other people. But once Linda filed for divorce, the shine wore off quickly. It began quietly, with a single legal notice taped to the front door of the Blake residence. By noon, 3 m. or envelopes arrived formal, embossed, impossible to ignore. Linda didn't wait. She exercised every right she had. She froze their shared assets immediately, locked accounts, halted withdrawals, canceled credit cards that Ryan relied on for everything, from flashy restaurants to the small luxuries he used to impress women who weren't his wife. He discovered the frozen funds during a lunch meeting. His card declined in front of two prospective clients. Witnesses later said he laughed it off awkwardly, but his face turned noticeably pale. The cracks had started, and they widened fast. By the end of the week, Ryan's business partners began pulling away. Not because they cared about his affair. They didn't. They cared about reputation, optics. The whispers circulating through the neighborhood had spilled into town, trickling into the professional circles where Ryan thrived. A man who cheats on his wife is one thing. A man involved in an active CPS and custody investigation. A liability. One partner sent an email citing ethical concerns. Another canceled their upcoming project. A third demanded Ryan step back from public-facing roles until the matter is resolved. The blow hit him hard. Daniel could see it from across the street, the once confident neighbor now moving like a man carrying invisible weight. His yard went untrimmed. His blinds remained closed. He left early and returned late, avoiding eye contact with anyone. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was consequence. And then Detective Harris Cole visited him. Daniel saw the patrol car in the driveway that afternoon but didn't approach. He simply watched from his kitchen window as Cole spoke to Ryan for nearly 15 minutes. Ryan gestured wildly, clearly agitated. Cole remained calm, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Later, Cole stopped by Daniel's home to provide a procedural update. At the end of the conversation, he added casually, "There's a chance Mr. Blake may face charges for trespassing the night. He entered your home without permission." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Trespassing?" Cole nodded. "He entered with no legal right. The fact that a child was present in the home only strengthens the case. We're reviewing the matter." Daniel didn't smile, didn't react outwardly. He only nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that another domino had tipped. That evening, while Daniel packed Emma's lunch for the next day, his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. When he opened the message, he felt the familiar weight of someone trying to shift blame away from themselves. It was Ryan. "This is all Megan's fault. She told me you two were basically done. She's dragging everyone down with her. You should have controlled her better." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment, astonished not by the content but by the audacity. Even now, Ryan sought someone else to carry responsibility for choices he'd made freely. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. He simply deleted the message and blocked the number. Minutes later, another message arrived, this one from Linda. "Update: my lawyer says the judge will likely grant me majority assets because of the misconduct. I'm doing okay, moving on, slowly but cleanly. Hope you and Emma are finding peace." Daniel felt a gentle warmth in that. Not joy at Ryan's downfall, not excitement at someone else's misery, just relief that someone who deserved closure was finally getting it. He typed a simple reply. "Glad you're finding your footing. Wishing you peace too." No lingering attachments, no emotional entanglements, just mutual respect between two people who had survived the same storm without sinking. In the following days, news trickled through the neighborhood like leaves blown across pavement. Ryan had abandoned his weekly golf group. His business temporarily suspended operations. Linda had changed the locks and requested a restraining order after one heated argument. And several neighbors who once praised Ryan's charm now avoided him entirely, whispering about his temper, his arrogance, his recklessness. Daniel didn't participate in the gossip. He didn't need to. He observed the collapse with the distance of someone who had stepped away from the fire long before the flames consumed the rest. Because betrayal comes with a price, and Ryan was paying his in installments. Daniel stood on his porch one evening, Emma playing with chalk on the driveway, while the late sun glowed softly across the neighborhood. Ryan's house sat dark and hollow, a quiet reminder of choices that had finally caught up to him. And Daniel realized something simple, something grounding. He hadn't raised a hand. He hadn't thrown a punch. He hadn't engineered revenge. He had simply protected his daughter. And the universe had taken care of the rest. Tomorrow, he knew, more healing awaited, more rebuilding, more quiet choices that shaped the life he and Emma were creating together. But tonight he allowed himself a long breath, steady and calm. The store. Em behind him. The consequences no longer his. For the first time in months, the house held a different kind of quiet, one that wasn't heavy or watchful or waiting for the next disaster to unfold. It was a gentle quiet, the kind that lived between morning routines and bedtime stories, the kind that settled into the walls after chaos finally loosened its grip. Daniel felt it most in the early mornings. Instead of waking to tension or to Megan slamming cabinets in resentment, he woke to the soft patter of Emma's feet on the hallway floor and her small knock on his bedroom door. "Daddy, can we make pancakes?" It became their ritual: Saturday pancakes, weekday oatmeal, and lunches packed with notes that simply said, "Daddy loves you." Emma changed too. She laughed more bright, belly-deep laughs that had been rare during the last year. She ate without coaxing. She slept through the night without waking up from hunger or fear or loneliness. Her behavior improved at school. Her teacher emailed Daniel twice that week, praising her newfound confidence. "She seems lighter," she wrote. Daniel read that sentence over and over. He didn't say it aloud, but he felt lighter too. Still, he knew healing didn't happen just by removing the harm. So, on Carla's recommendation, he joined a single-parent support group at the community center. He wasn't the type to share feelings with strangers, but he found comfort in being in a room filled with stories that sounded painfully familiar. People who had rebuilt after betrayal, who had raised children alone, who had somehow kept moving even when nothing made sense. He didn't talk much at first. He mostly listened. But each week, he contributed a little more, not to unload, but to understand himself, to define what kind of father he wanted to be now that everything rested on his shoulders. The neighbors noticed the change in him, too. Mrs. Hathaway dropped off cookies one evening and said, "You're doing good, Daniel, real good." She's happy. Anyone can see it. Others waved more often, offered help, even invited Emma to playdates. The same neighborhood that once whispered about the scandal now whispered something different. Respect. Resilience. Quiet admiration for a man who had weathered a storm without becoming the storm. One afternoon, Daniel picked Emma up from school, and she ran toward him with a drawing clutched in her hand. She held it up proudly before he even bent down. "I made this for us." The picture was simple, two stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. She had written a title in her careful, uneven handwriting. "Me and Daddy safe now." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight for so long he almost didn't recognize the feeling at first. Relief. He blinked once, not wanting to cry in the school parking lot, and ruffled her hair gently. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." When they got home, he found an empty frame in the hallway closet, the one Megan once bought for a picture they never took, and placed the drawing inside. He hung it on the wall near the living room light switch where they'd see it every day. For Emma, it was a picture. For Daniel, it was proof that the world, though battered, could still be righted. As the weeks passed, the house transformed piece by piece. New decor, fresh colors, furniture rearranged to make space for play, for warmth, for life. The tension that had once seeped into every corner evaporated. Even the air felt different, lighter, as if exhaling after being held captive too long. One evening, Daniel stood in the doorway of the living room, watching Emma color quietly under the soft glow of a new lamp they'd picked out together. The framed drawing hung behind her like a declaration, a reminder, a promise fulfilled. His home finally felt like home again. Not a battlefield, not a place of secrets, not a house living under the shadow of neglect. It was theirs. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a gentle click. The same sound that had once marked the moment everything shattered now marked something else entirely. Rebuilding, peace, and the beginning of a life defined not by what had broken, but by what had survived. Tomorrow, he knew, there would be more choices to make, more routines to shape, more strength required. But for now, in the warm light of his living room with Emma humming softly as she colored, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. For the first time in far too long, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a doorway finally opening. The house was quiet in that soft way it only became after Emma fell asleep. Lights dimmed, dishes drying on the rack, the faint hum of the heater pushing warmth through the vents. Daniel stood in the doorway of her room, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her small chest beneath the blankets. Her hair fanned across the pillow like a halo, her fingers still curled loosely around her stuffed rabbit. Moments like this were simple, ordinary, but for Daniel they were hard-won. He leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, letting the stillness wrap around him. Nights were when the past spoke the loudest, not to torment him, but to remind him how close he had come to losing everything that mattered. Not physically, Emma had never been taken from him, but emotionally, spiritually, in the quiet ways children drift when their needs go unheard. He remembered the nights he'd come home exhausted, believing Megan's excuses, missing the subtle signs. Emma's tired eyes, her reluctance to speak, the way she clung to him a little longer on the nights Megan disappeared into the bathroom for hours. He didn't see it then, but he saw it now with painful clarity. That bathtub scene, the warm water splashing, the laughter behind a locked door, Ryan's shoes tossed carelessly in the hallway while his daughter cried for food upstairs. That was the moment the blindfold tore off. He replayed it 100 times since, not out of anger but out of revelation. The image wasn't about betrayal between adults. It was about the child left alone on the other side of a door that should have been opened long before. That single moment had shifted something fundamental inside him. His world narrowed, his purpose sharpened. Every step he took after that wasn't rage, it was strategy. Each choice measured, each action deliberate, every piece of evidence gathered not for revenge but for protection. Every courtroom exchange, every conversation with Carla, every documented timestamp, all of it aimed toward the same outcome. Emma's safety, her future, her childhood. As he stood there now, the weight of those months pressed against him, not as a burden but as acknowledgement. He hadn't been perfect. He hadn't seen the signs soon enough. But when the truth finally burst into the open, he hadn't crumbled. He had acted. A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. Emma shifted in bed, eyes opening just enough to see him standing there. Sleep softened her voice to a whisper, "Daddy." He stepped closer. "I'm here, sweetheart." She pushed herself up and wrapped her arms around his neck, warm and trusting and absolute. "You're my hero," she murmured into his shoulder. Daniel closed his eyes. The words didn't stroke his ego. They broke something and healed something at the same time. He kissed her forehead gently and laid her back down. "Get some sleep," he whispered. "Daddy's right outside." Her breathing steadied almost instantly. He stayed beside her for another minute, watching her settle into dreams untouched by fear. Then he walked downstairs, each step slow, reflective. The house met him with its new quiet, no slammed doors, no muffled arguments, no hidden dread lurking behind half-drawn curtains. He turned off the living room lamp and paused in the hallway, looking toward the front door. The same door he once locked in a moment of shock and fury. The same door he'd shut behind him when he carried Emma away from a home that had betrayed her innocence. He approached it now, fingers brushing the cool metal of the new locks. There was no adrenaline this time. No trembling. No confusion. Only purpose. He turned the lock gently, the click soft, final, honest. Not to keep danger trapped inside, but to keep his daughter safe inside. Not to barricade himself from betrayal, but to protect the life he had rebuilt piece by piece. He stood there a moment longer, hands still on the lock, absorbing the full arc of the journey. The night everything fell apart, the long months of gathering truth, the courtroom battles, the tears, the guilt, the fear, the determination that rose like a tide and never receded. People talked about revenge like it was a flame. But for Daniel, it had never been fire. It had been a door. A locked one. A choice. A moment when he realized he could either accept the life collapsing around him or create a new one with steady hands. He stepped away from the door, turning off the last light in the hallway. The house settled, quiet and warm, carrying the weight of safety now instead of secrets. Tomorrow, life would continue, ordinary and beautiful. Pancakes, school drop-offs, support groups, bedtime stories. One safe night after another. Daniel exhaled slowly, relishing the peace he hadn't thought he'd ever feel again. Then in the darkness, he spoke the truth he had finally earned. The night I locked that door, I didn't plan revenge. I planned our escape.